So we saw that, the Britishers, they were finally able to suppress the revolt, which emerged at different centers. There were many leaders who led the revolt, but the Britishers were able to suppress these leaders, these revolts in different regions one by one, and within 1 year, they were able to completely suppress this revolt. Now, what were the reasons which led to the failure of this uprising or the revolt? Why were the Britishers able to suppress this revolt when so many people, so many leaders, they were involved in this revolt? Let us see the reasons which were responsible for the success of the Britishers who were able to suppress this revolt. First, we see that the revolt was not organized properly. We saw that, it initiated as a sepoy mutiny, soldiers' revolt. The outrage by Mangal Pandey, which was followed by soldiers in Meerut, and so on. We see that it was not organized properly. The revolt, it broke out at one place, then went on to spread to other, then later, a month later, it spread to other regions. Eventually, different sections of the society and different regions were joining, but it was not centrally organized properly. It was not done in a proper pre-decided manner that we are going to break out a revolt. Everyone at the same time is going to revolt against the British. That did not happen. All these centers did not revolt together against the British. So we see, it was not properly organized. Then we see that this revolt, it did not spread to all parts of the country. It was largely confined to only the North India. We see that not all the sections of society were involved. Although we know that there were various sections involved, zamindars, peasants, artisans, craftsmen, some rulers, but still there were many sections of the society who were not a part of this revolt. So these were the reasons which led to the failure of this revolt. We see large parts of Madras, Bombay, Bengal, the northeast region. They remain untouched. They were not at all a part of this revolt. They did not participate in this revolt. So this revolt was largely confined to North Indian regions. Then we see that various Indian rulers, they went on to support British. Instead of supporting the rebellions, these rulers, they supported the British, like the Sindhi of Gwalior, Holkars of Indore, Nizams of Hyderabad. They were in favor of British rule. So we see that these rulers also provided no support to the rebellions. Then we see certain other section, the westernized educated Indians, the educated Indian class who had acquired, all this Western education in English, they favored British rule in India. They were in fact against the rebellions. They felt that British rule was a boon for India because of the social reforms that they were bringing. The rebellions, they saw the Britishers' interference like abolition of sati, widow remarriage, education of women. All these steps were seen as interference in the traditions and customs of India, while these educated Indians, they saw it as progressive social reforms. So the educated Indian class thought that British rule is good for India. It is going to make India a very progressive country, and so Britishers should stay here. So they did not support the rebellions, the people who rebelled. So that is how we see that this revolt actually did not spread to all the parts. It did not include all the sections of the society, and it was not organized properly. It was not pre-decided that a revolt will break out. So it started off from one sepoy mutiny and eventually it spread to different regions at different point of time. And this being the factor, it being so disorganized, that is the reason it failed. Then another reason we see there was lack of centralized leadership. We know there were various regions, various centers where various different leaders emerged. But there was no one single leadership who could have led everyone. So there was lack of centralized leadership and lack of resources which led to the failure. No leader came up as a national leader. These leaders were only local in nature. They were only local leaders. They did not come up with any national program which could be an alternative to the British rule. So they did not come up with a plan that let us oust the Britishers completely from India, and then this is the kind of political, setup or whatever kind of setup we are going to have. There was no such thing. They were just fighting at local levels to get rid of the British from that region. So that is why there was no centralized leadership, it was not organized properly, and that is why it could not succeed. Then there was lack of resources, financial resources, the technology, the weapons, the soldiers were not so disciplined. So these were other factors which led to the failure. The arms, the weapons which were used by the rebellions, they were very outdated. They used weapons like swords and pikes, while the Britishers, they were using far better technology. They had guns and all, while these rebellions, they relied on simple, weapons. So that was one of the factor why these rebellions lost this revolt. The Britishers, they had powerful resources, they had weapon, they had technology, they were financially secure, they were getting all these supplies of weapons, ammunition from England. Properly trained soldiers and army was being supplied from there to let the Britishers gain control. They were better organized and they had superior arms. So we see that Britishers, they were also getting support of various native rulers as well. And that is the reason that Britishers, they could successfully suppress this revolt. So there were various reasons: lack of centralized leadership, it was not organized properly, proper resources were not there, many sections did not join, many regions of country did not join, the weapons were, technology used was not superior. These reasons led to the failure of this uprising or the revolt of 1857, and that is how we see that Britishers emerged victorious. They were able to suppress this revolt and they go on to further rule for another 100 years. So we see that the British were successfully able to suppress this revolt of 1857. Now we are going to talk about the results of the revolt. The revolt made the Britishers realize that it is time for certain changes to be brought about. Certain changes so as to please the Indian people, and certain changes to control certain factors to ensure that no such revolt again happens in future. So they bring about certain changes in their strategy and certain other changes. First of all, the major result of this revolt was it brought an end to the East India Company's rule. Mind you, British rule did not come to an end. Only East India Company's rule came to an end, and there was transfer of power from East India Company's hand to the British Crown. That is, now India came under the direct rule of the British Parliament and the Queen of England. Until now, the East India Company was governing the country, India, but now India came under the direct rule of the British Parliament and the Queen of England. Second major step that they took was doctrine of lapse was abolished, because it was one of the major reasons why many native rulers turned against the British. So they abolished this doctrine of lapse. British also promised that now no new kingdom would be annexed. And as we saw that certain social and religious reforms that were brought about by the British became the cause of this revolt, that is why British decided that they will no more interfere in the social and religious life of the Indians. They are not going to support any social reform from now onwards, because that might lead to any other revolt. So there was no more interference to be done now in the social and religious lives of the Indians. Then we see artillery was also now placed under the British soldier, because the Britishers did not trust the Indian soldiers now. So all the important divisions of this army, they were placed under the in charge of the Britishers. Then they also ensured that the welfare of the Indian people, they said that now the welfare of the Indian people will be our priority and it will be looked after. They wanted to please the Indian people and to satisfy them that they should have no reason of anger against the Britishers. Besides that, the number of the British soldiers in the army was also increased. as they saw that the Indian soldiers can at any point of time turn against them. So it is important to have more British soldiers in the army so as to have control over the Indian soldiers. So we see that the number of British soldiers was also increased. So several changes were brought about as a result of this revolt. Talking about the nature of this uprising, this rebellion that happened in 1857, we studied right at the beginning that the Britishers, they consider it just a sepoy mutiny. That is only a soldiers' revolt. It was a small level soldiers' revolt which happened because of the introduction of new cartridges. But actually, it was not just a small sepoy mutiny, rather, it is considered as the first war of Indian independence. It is the first war when the Indians came up together to fight for independence from a foreign rule. So why is it considered as first war of Indian independence? Because it is for the first time civil and military Indian officials fought against the foreign rule. Civil officials, that is common people. We saw not only soldiers participating in this revolt, we also saw common people participating in this war, in this rebellion against the foreign rule, and that is why it was not only a sepoy mutiny, because common people were also a part of it. Then we see different sections of the society: peasants, rulers, zamindars, be it Hindus, be it Muslims. These many, all the different section societies, not all but various different sections of the society were very much a part of this revolt. Although we see that it was not properly organized, not central leadership was provided, it lacked discipline, yet this revolt shook the foundations of British rule. And it also went on to inspire the nationalist movement in India against British. So it was no normal sepoy mutiny. It was by nature, the very first war of Indian independence, the very first time that the Indians came up together to fight against the foreign rule.